The skip is the artwork, the performance presentation of Marcia Farquhar, who is a performance artist and does fantastic pieces. And Marcia was talking about the possibility of Marcia Farquhar's Open University lectures from a skip, and would I be one of the lecturers? Yes, of course. Fantastic. The subject of each speaker is around the trash. What would they have trashed, and what would they defend against being trashed? What would they pick out of the trash to keep? Good evening, and first of all, an enormous thank you to Marcia for inviting me to be in this skip this evening. And this evening I want to both evoke the lecturer and invoke, which means take the lecturer inside so that he can stay on his subject, on his chosen subject, which is the transformation of trash. The fact that we may find trash and there may be a way of allowing it to transform and to change into something more suitable for our use, and also to get rid of some of the anger that trash may bring up, or to know how to process that anger. And as I'm an improviser, I want very much to not know where I'm going, so that I may launch off into a story and you may have to say, come back to the point, because there'll only be a certain amount of time and then I need to try and come to a culmination. And why I'm wearing the purple this evening is because my father was a vicar, and I've been played in the theatre many times, vicars, and eventually I played for Alistair Beaton. I played the Archbishop of Canterbury in a play called The King of Hearts, and in the play the king is dying, which would be Prince Charles. The sons are given different names, and the security are suddenly alerted because the eldest son has fallen in love with a Muslim girl. And so then all the bonfire starts burning, and they bring in the Archbishop largely because he'll know about the rules on succession to the throne. And he can't going backward to all this stuff. And then at some point, he actually decides that it's time to let them marry and to actually disestablish the Church of England. And that's the moment that I want to say that I would so much delight in, if they could disassociate it from royalty and also make it no more important than the other religions that are around in England today. So that is one aspect for wearing the shirt, and talking about that aspect is for me something that I would like to trash, really. He says something about someone asked him about the virgin birth, and he says, well, we don't take that literally, for heaven's sake. And they said, but surely you have to. And he said, no. He said, then they said, well, won't he come back and strike you for speaking the way you are? And he said, no, he's not coming back. He said, no one in the Church of England believes that. A few Catholics maybe, but not anyone in the Church of England. So that there was this possibility of my being excited by having that to say in this shirt. And then I will go to wind back a bit to say that when you're in a skip and you have the sense that actually what you're saying is trash, it's very likely. James Castle, who's here, suggested that people should start throwing things. It would be even better if it was raining, so that the person in the skip was closer to the trash that they're talking about, that they're actually having the experience of being the trash. Now, at moments in your life, I certainly have had moments when I have felt trashed, or that I am trash. And in those moments, is if I move over onto this side, I've moved over onto your right. And in this position, you may envisage me as being correct. And if I go over into this side, you may envisage, especially if I slightly shrink, that I am rather dejected and uncomfortable about being in this area. If I get into that even more, so that I allow myself to take on, to invoke again, the sense of being rubbish, then the sounds of the voices, the sound of that block being hit, the more interesting than me, a tin can rolling in the street over there. The sides of this are cold, uncomforting. The floor, luckily there is a little bit of parquet flooring I hadn't noticed, so it seems like parquet flooring under my feet. But I'm in this situation, and if I want to transform that, I have to allow myself to in some way delight or notice that it's much better than at first I thought it was. Once I start using this process, I will transform it, and gradually I'll find myself moving over to the position where I'm more comfortable being trash and being in the skip. I hope that it becomes clear to you. You can practice for yourselves. It's just move about in a room and you'll get the feeling that you can decide where you want to move. Now, another way of doing it is if you're in the right position, you remind yourselves of things that you do easily, that we're called a piece of cake, something that is no trouble to you at all. And for me, not when I start drawing, I get into all sorts of trouble, but the delight is there and the interest in, eventually I will get through to something that starts to really interest me. If I get in that mode, and I start to feel more myself and confident, and I then step over into the area of trash, the area of trash seems to have disappeared. So I've transformed it by getting into a different imaginative state and moving across. I've been going to poetry classes. I met by chance an American woman, a poet who's called Jane Duran, and she has a child who knows our little boy, and they met up through this, and then we started. I had eventually the courage to say, I want you to look at some of my writing. And directly she did. She said, oh good grief. Now, there's a good line, and then there's a lot of rubbish. And then there's another one. So there are some here, but no, this is mostly. Then she said, eventually you should come to the classes. Now, to go to the classes, all the other people have been doing a lot of poetry recently and for their lives. And so I start off at the bottom of the class. But gradually I start to get into the game, and I start to understand a little bit more about what they're doing. And I wanted to read you the last poem that I read, but it's also because it goes to and from the idea of trash. Also the fact that a lecturer, I read in the diary, is usually reading. The lecture is often written and then read out rather than improvised or done in this fractious way. I just have to turn over pages until I can find it if I can. No. What's in this book is little bits of script and all sorts of stuff. Yes, here we are. It's called The Big Pullover. The Big Pullover. The jumper goes over the head. The child goes into the darkness. Wool in the mouth and eyes. Are there 3 ways out? No. The sleeves are misleading. The right way is the right way up. Colour seen through the fabric is best ignored. The Tibetan Book of the Dead warns of the coloured lights that lead back to reincarnation. Wait for the white. Hello, we were waiting for you, waiting to see you. Here comes the bus. That's the end of it. So what I really want is, again, if I can, this possibility that reincarnation, when I was doing national service, there was a chaplain who came in and wanted to make sure that everyone was Christian. And there was one Indian who wasn't, who was Hindu. And so they got into arguments with him. He asked him about his faith, and he started talking about Ganesha, the elephant, who I like very much, who was a man who had his head cut off, and they picked up the first head they could put on the body, and it was an elephant's head. And so you've got Ganesha with his elephant's head. And he said it's so obviously complete nonsense. And he also said about the monkey that jumped over from the mainland to Sri Lanka. And the Hindu said back, but then surely there are aspects of the virgin birth and of the rising from the dead and all sorts of things which are just as fantastical. And that the whole purpose is to have stories that are totally fantastical, that are not expected to be explored scientifically, but are to be responded to imaginatively. And then you're closer to the idea that you can move from the area of trash, go to the area where you're feeling better about things, and if you wish, of course, bring Jesus with you, and he'll come very merrily into, and you'll feel very good there, because he's been in that sort of muck before as well. He doesn't mind at all being there. So you can, now also it is possible, with a bit of practice, to, as it were, evoke the figure that you wish to, into whose shoes you wish to step, and you get enough into the trance, and go forward into those feet, and take on the radiance of the person who I don't have to declare who it is, but then I take on the radiance of the figure that I've been thinking about, and that may last for several hours. If I can go again and get recharged. So there's the possibility of using our imagination to transform the trash into vibrancy. One of the Indian masters said, don't think that love is very hot. The Spanish, they think it's very hot, you know, maybe it is in Spain, but he said in India we are very hot already, and we have found that love is really quite a cool and gentle breeze, and that you can radiate that coolness and allow it to radiate out and then check out. And you may notice one person who's very much resisting, but the others may actually be starting to warm a little bit to the radiation that you're putting out. If it doesn't work, it's worth maybe making the attempt to transform that trash, to make the effort to allow yourself to look after your own state so that your own immune system rises. Now, even as simply as saying that when we look down, and if I go into the darkness again, I'm looking down, it is likely that I become more soulful. It also allows me to sink. If I look up at all, I start to inevitably raise my own spirit. If someone is unhappy, a child is unhappy, and you draw their attention to a window that's high up or something in the sky, the very fact of looking up lightens their mood. I was editing the ARC, the Royal College of Art magazine, and one of the people I was put in touch with to get writing from was N.F. Simpson. So I didn't know him, but I got a piece of his writing. We published it freely, so he gave it also, in a sense, to be trashed if it was going to be trashed. It was published in our magazine. Then there was a review called One to Another at the Lyric Hammersmith, where they were wanting to get away from the camp types of review that were going on and have what they called a German style, serious piece of a review made up of pieces of serious writing. And they employed me. They knew that they wanted pieces from our shows. They weren't written down. I had to ad-lib them, and they recorded them, and then they typed them out so they had a script for them, and they were going to give them to Beryl Reid and Patrick Wymark, who were the big people in the cast, and they employed me as a stagehand, and then also I might be at the bottom of the cast, so I'd also get to play. Very quickly, luckily, the stars said, he can't come in and be marking the floor out when the others are only just arriving, when he's also now one of the actors and a writer. So when you're put in the pool of writers, you've got a very small percentage, and we're getting percentages alongside N.F. Simpson, Harold Pinter, Peter Cook, John Mortimer, legion of English, John Cranko. There were legion of writers who were suddenly brought into that pool. And then when they did One Way Pendulum, I got to play Kirby in One Way Pendulum, which was one of the early plays of N.F. Simpson. 50 years later, they had celebrating 50 years of theatre at the Royal Court Theatre. They invited in Wally Simpson to reread the plays that he'd written 50 years before. When he came to do that, they asked him, had he got any new writing? He was now 88. He said, I've just written a play called If So, Then Yes. I got to play Geoffrey Withenshaw, who was his alter ego in this little piece. And we did it at the Jermyn Street Theatre. One of the reviewers said they came in trepidation, fearing that his work would be tailing off, and found actually that he had surpassed himself. And the last play has his comic material, and then at the end of the play it has a lecture. And the lecture would be worth giving in this skip, because it's about the necessity for absurdity, and the necessity for the irrational rather than the rational way. So again, he is taking, I would say, out of what would be trashed or might be trashed, something that can be transformed into something of value. And that's the last word, I think. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I do. Anyway.